Dear students, hearty welcome to this lecture on the second lesson of the third module of the text, Nature Matters, Readings on Life and Nature, which is prescribed for the second semester UG Common Course students of Kannur University as Course 2A03 ENG. The chapter is entitled Environmental Values. Values are the standards with which we evaluate actions, people, things, or situations. All of us are familiar with different kinds of values like justice, honesty, generosity, forgiveness, kindness, etc. But what do you mean by environmental values? Environmental values refer to inborn feelings that help to bring about environmental sensitivity in individuals. Okay, let us understand deeply what you really mean by environmental values. Okay, let us go through the text. Every human being has a great variety of feelings for different aspects of his or her surroundings. We know that every people has some feeling towards their surroundings. The Western modern approach values the resources of nature for their utilitarian importance alone. Okay, we can see that the modern approach or the Western approach values nature for their utilitarian importance alone. The word utilitarian actually it was coined by one of the famous philosophers and a judge, Jeremy Bentham. So he argued that his principle of utility would create the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. Means the people who adhere to the philosophy of usefulness are known as utilitarians. Okay, so here we can see that the Western approach is after usefulness or practicalness. Okay, so they will be valuing nature only if they are benefited out of it. Okay, if you are valuing a river for its water, the sea for its fish, and a forest for its timber and non-wood forest products, then we cannot call it as environmental values because the true environmental values go beyond that. We can see the next sentence. Environmental values are inherent in feelings that bring about a sensitivity for preserving nature as a whole. This is a more integrated native view which can be contrasted with the profit-oriented and exploitative views brought in by the colonizers. Okay, we can see that one of the fundamental environmental values is the understanding that preservation of nature happens as a whole, not in parts. It also speaks against the profit-oriented view that is being brought about by the colonizers. The colonizers gave importance to the profit-oriented and exploitative views that created many environmental problems. The current value system, based on these colonial views, they are giving importance to economic and technical progress. The residues of these colonial values have made our education system more deeply anti-environmental. The colonial views sidelined Indian value systems that supported oneness of all creations in nature. Our environmental values must translate to pro-conservation actions in all our day-to-day activities. What do you mean by pro-conservation? Pro-conservation means in favor of conservation. It is the action of preserving the environment, keeping it from being damaged or destroyed. Unless we consciously avoid, most of our actions can result in severe environmental impacts. Theodore Roosevelt, 26th US President, is often considered the conservationist president. After becoming president in 1901, Roosevelt used his authority to establish many national monuments, national forests, wildlife sanctuaries, etc. That's why he is known as the conservationist president. And coming to the next para, humans have an inborn desire to explore nature. Wanting to unravel its mysteries is a part of human nature. However, modern society and educational process have invariably suppressed these innate sentiments. So we all have an inborn desire to explore and unravel nature's mysteries. So the introduction of modern society and educational process have suppressed the innate human desire. If an individual is exposed to the wonders of nature, he or she would start appreciating it and would develop a desire to protect nature. This feeling of nature can even be seen in our constitution. Article 51A, Part G, it says that it shall be the duty of every citizen of India to protect and improve the natural environment including forests, lakes, rivers, wildlife, and to have a compassion for all living creatures. So that you can see even in our constitution. And coming to the next para, we can see that once exposed to wonders of the wilderness, people tend to bond closely to nature. They begin to appreciate its complexity and fragility, and this awakens a new desire to protect our natural heritage. Okay, let us move on to the next para. Concepts of what constitutes right and wrong behavior changes with the time. Okay, so we know the concepts of certain behaviors being right and wrong changes over time. Values are not constant. It was once considered sport to shoot animals. It was considered a royal, brave and much desirable activity to kill a tiger. In today's context, with the wildlife reduced to a tiny fraction of what there was in the past, it's now looked down upon as a crime against biodiversity conservation. Thus, the value system has been altered with the time. Okay, we can see that environmental values have also undergone changes with the time. The shooting of animals was considered to be a favorite sport of people of power in the past. Hunting was considered to be an act that displayed bravery. But in today's context, such killings cannot be encouraged, as the wildlife has reduced to a tiny fraction of what there was in the past. Killing of a tiger or any such animal is considered as a crime against biodiversity conservation in the present decade. Wildlife Protection Act 1972 is enacted for the protection of all plants and all animals. It says that capturing, trapping, poisoning or baiting of any wild animal or attempting to do is punishable by law. Okay, this with a fine of up to 25,000 or imprisonment or both. So this shows that the value system has altered with the time. Similarly, the cutting of a few trees was not a significant criminal act in the past, but today the number of trees has reduced. So if you cut a few trees, then it will also become a criminal activity. We need a strong new environmental value system in which felling trees are also considered as an unwise behavior. Earlier, when the number of people are low, throwing away a little degradable garbage could not have been considered wrong. But now, with a large number of people throwing large quantities of non-degradable garbage, it is indeed extremely damaging to the environment. So, we need a strong environmental value system. Then moving on to the fourth and fifth para, appreciating the negative effects of our actions on the environment must become a part of our day-to-day thinking. Our current value system extols economic and technical progress as being what we need in our developing country. While we do need economic development, our value system must change to one that makes people everywhere support a sustainable form of development so that we do not have to bear the cost of environmental degradation. This para, it says that the current value system seems to be giving importance to economic and technological progress. But the progress could have a negative impact on the environment. Our value system must focus on sustainable development and should try to avoid environmental degradation. What do you mean by sustainable development? Sustainable development can be defined as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. So, environmental problems happen mainly due to lack of awareness of the consequences of anti-environmental behavior. The present century focuses only on economic and technological progress. People exploit nature for fulfilling their needs, or we can say their greed. The infiltration of the Western utilitarian commercial thoughts has silenced the native pro-environmental behaviors. We should understand what is appropriate behavior and what is not appropriate behavior in relation to our surroundings and other species on Earth. So, how we live our lives in fact shapes our environment, and this constitutes the real environmental value. Then, in order to create sustainable environmental values, changes must be made in the present education process. It's equally important to implement sustainable practices at both community and individual levels. At the community level, these actions take place when a critical number of people become environmentally conscious. This can make the government and other people accept good environmental behavior as an important part of development. Environmental values have a connection with several environmental concerns. We should also appreciate different environmental services. So these include nature's mechanisms in cleaning up air. We know this process of photosynthesis. Okay, so we know how plants are involving in the process of photosynthesis. So they are intaking carbon dioxide and they are releasing oxygen. So we know that nature's mechanisms in cleaning up air by removing carbon dioxide and adding oxygen and recycling water, etc. So along with this, we should also appreciate other often neglected values like aesthetic and ethical aspects of our environment. We need to value every form of species as they are important in the web of life. There are some which man has come to admire for their beauty alone. That include tiger's magnificence, the whale and the elephant's giant size, the intelligence of our cousins, the primates, the graceful flight of cranes, etc. So existence value is linked to appreciating different wondrous forms of life. So we value the great power of ocean or the evergreen forest and the tranquility of Himalayan mountain only because they are there for us. They are there on earth for us. Even if we are not seeing it, we are valuing it for its existence on the earth. So that is called existence value. Okay, we must also look into the man-made plantations, man-made landscapes, etc. So urban gardens and open spaces are also valuable because these gardens and these spaces are acting as some psychological support to the urban dwellers. So these centers of peace and tranquility give urban people an opportunity to balance their hectic, man-modified environment with a splash of green of a garden space. So it is also essential to preserve ancient structures as they are important assets of our heritage and environment. So there is a need to develop more sustainable ways of life. Environmental values must also stress on the importance of preserving ancient structures. In Kerala, we have lots of ancient structures like Edakal Caves, Bakal Fort, Anju Fort, Marayur, etc. So we have to protect, we have to respect our ancient heritage sites. There are positive aspects of our behavior that include values for nature, culture, heritage and equity. Similarly, there are negative aspects as well, like pollution, poverty, loss of species, corruption in environment management, etc. So people must become sensitive of these negative impacts and should try to follow the pro-environment behavior explained by scholars like Gandhi and Tagore. The earth has enough resources for our need but not for our greed. This is the most often quoted phrase by Gandhi. It depicts his concern for nature and environment. Much before the convening of any of the international conferences like the Stockholm Conference of 1972 and the Rio Earth Summit of 1992, and almost 100 years ago, Gandhi has voiced his concern for environment. Much before any modern environmentalist, Gandhi had cautioned the world about the problems of the larger scale industrialization, which we are confronting today. His seminal work Hind Swaraj, written 100 years ago in the year 1909, warned the dangers of the world is facing today in the form of environmental destruction and the threat to the planet. Gandhi was a great believer in Advaita, non-duality, and in the essential unity of man and all lives. Nature, according to Gandhi, is a source and force of inspiration and not exploitation. Similarly, Tagore also believed that man is supposed to live in harmony with nature and recognize that divinity prevails in all elements including plants and animals. Otherwise, if he wished to walk upon the single way of human development, he would lose his balance. He also said that the first stage of my realization was through my feeling of intimacy with nature. These words of Tagore reveal the intensity of his relationship with nature, whose movements had a profound, passionate effect on Tagore's sensitive mind. While talking about the last session of this essay, it is titled as Valuing Nature. We can move on to that session. The most fundamental environmental sentiment is to value nature herself. Appreciating her magnificence and treasuring life itself leads to positive feelings that are a manifestation of pro-environmental consciousness, the oneness of our lives with the rest of nature, and a feeling that we are only a minuscule part of nature's complex web of life becomes apparent when we begin to appreciate the wonders of nature. So, nature can be valued by appreciating the wondrous aspects of biodiversity and by having a feeling of oneness with all other forms of life on nature. People should understand that they are just one amongst 1.8 million non-living forms. Human beings should also preserve what is left of the wilderness in the form of national parks and wildlife sanctuaries. And also we should admire the beauties of nature as well as we should appreciate man-modified landscapes. Now we can move on to the last session of this lecture, that is questions and answers. Let us see the first question. First question is, define environmental values. Answer. Environmental values are inherent feelings that bring about a sensitivity for preserving nature as a whole. Second question. How do native societies view nature? Native societies view nature with a feeling of oneness of all creations, and they respect and value all the different components of nature. Third question. What is environmental awareness? Answer. Environmental awareness means being aware of the natural environment and making choices that benefit the earth rather than hurt it. So, we have to create a pro-environmental behavior in relation to our surroundings. Then fourth question, why do humans explore nature? Answer, humans explore nature because they have an inborn desire to unravel the mysteries of nature. Then fifth question, state the causes of environmental problems. Answer, the causes of environmental problems are lack of awareness of the consequences of unlimited and unrestrained anti-environmental behavior. It is also caused because of the profit-oriented and exploitative actions carried out in the name of development and modernization. Sixth question, Mention some of the environmental services. Answer. Environmental services include nature's mechanisms in cleaning up air by removing carbon dioxide and adding oxygen by plant life, recycling water through the water cycle of nature, maintaining climate regimes, etc. Then seventh question, how do we educate people on environmental values? Answer, people can be educated on these values by promoting new educational processes and also by making them a part in pro-environmental programs. Then eighth question, what is a fundamental environmental sentiment? The most fundamental environmental sentiment is to value nature herself. One should appreciate her magnificence, and treasuring life itself leads to positive feelings that are manifestations of pro-environmental consciousness. The ninth question, give an example of how environmental awareness extends to man-made landscapes. The construction of urban gardens, open space, farmland or plantations on the hills are examples of environmental awareness extended to man-made landscapes because they highlight the need to preserve biodiversity. And the 10th question, define existence values. Answer, existence values refer to valuing different wonderful aspects of nature, life and its various forms on the earth, and also the interconnectedness of life. For example, the tranquility of the Himalayan mountains is something that each of us values even if we do not experience it ourselves. We value it being there on the earth for us. This is called its existence value. With this, I am winding up my session. Thank you.